Last night, I watched the Netflix documentary series Revisiting America's Next Top Model. And like many people, I was left in shock. Now, I remember watching the show when it first aired. It was entertaining, and each girl had a story, a dream, a reason you wanted her to make it. Viewers picked their favorites, you rooted for them, and even when they were eliminated, you hoped that they'll do well. Now, I watched Tyra's show, her talk show, and at the time I couldn't name what bothered me, but I remember noticing a pattern in your interviews. Something felt off, kind of mean girlish. And I remember when you introduced Beyonce and tried to trick her into not naming Jennifer Hudson as her favorite idol. I remember the way you treated Corinne Steffens. It just didn't sit well with me. So as I watched the documentary, I noticed your demeanor. It was as if you were answering questions for a beauty pageant. The answers were so polished, so careful, so perfect. There was a language of empowerment, but there was very little acknowledgement of the emotional cost that many of those young women described. You branded yourself as a protector of young women entering a brutal industry. You spoke often about what you endured and how you wanted to prepare them, strengthen them, guide them. But what we saw repeatedly was humiliation framed as mentorship. I used to think you were tough. Now I think you were performing care while demanding submission. I remember, for example, when a contestant would cry, the moment seemed meaningful. But when she appeared strong, guarded, or simply unwilling to perform devastation or brokenness on cue, it often became a problem. Now, the moment with Tiffany is particularly hard to forget. At that time, it was framed to make her seem like she didn't care enough, like she wasn't taking the opportunity seriously. And that's how many of us understood it when it first aired. But looking back, we now see. We see that Tiffany didn't fall apart when she was eliminated. She didn't cry the way you seemed to expect. She stood there trying to hold herself together. And instead of that being seen as strength, it became a problem. The moment escalated. Your voice got louder. The message shifted from disappointment to anger. Now, I didn't feel like you were upset that she was leaving. It felt like you were upset that she wasn't reacting the right way. And that's what made the scene uncomfortable then and even more uncomfortable now because it suggested that being strong or at least trying to stay composed wasn't enough. She had to show devastation. She had to prove how much it meant by breaking down in front of you and everyone watching. When she didn't do that, it felt personal. You allowed your ego and the secret power of holding someone's future in your hands get the best of you. And it's hard to watch now knowing how much trust those girls placed in you. And then there's Shandi. Oh, sweet Shandi. Many of us were left in tears after hearing the full story. Watching that table conversation again is difficult. She was young, drunk, and not able to consent. She had just made a mistake on national television. She was already carrying shame. What she needed in that moment was steadiness. Instead, the tone felt corrective, as if she'd done something scandalous, almost disappointed, and dare I say personal. The language of concern was there, but it was wrapped in judgment. Later, when she appeared on your talk show and the footage was revisited, she was further re traumatized. Some moments don't need an audience, and some lessons don't need replay. And at some point, integrity has to outweigh ratings. You often spoke about preparing these girls for an industry that would not protect them, but protection doesn't look like exposure. It doesn't look like it requires someone to relive their worst moments under bright lights, especially when she was surrounded by adults who failed to protect her. Shandy didn't deserve to be dragged through the mud. You owe her a sincere apology, and reparations wouldn't hurt either. Tyra, you built a career telling young women to find their voice and stand in their power. And I believed that message. Many of us did. And that's why revisiting these moments feels so different now. Empowerment shouldn't require humiliation. Care shouldn't depend on performance. And mentorship should never leave someone feeling smaller than when they arrived. For many of them, they are still picking up the pieces. And for that, you should be concerned. And a last thought. This does not only apply to Tyra, but it also applies to the judges. It also applies to the producers. It also applies to Ken. All of you, in the end, failed these girls. Thanks so much for listening.